Zula Hendrick made her debut in Aliens Defiance in 2016 and became something of a staple in the expanded universe, appearing in multiple comics and novels, but this is her first appearance in a video game. Was it a challenge to translate her across media to the game?
No, actually I would say that her characterization, especially inside of Defiance, is pretty solid. It's very easy to understand where she's coming from and what she's interested in. And couple that with the really good pairing between her and Davis, I think there's a lot of dynamite dramatic possibility. And so I will say that as the comics evolved, they went in a lot of directions that were very much extended universe kind of directions. So for the most part, I would say that we have stuck much more closely to the core lore for the character and the core lore for the series itself. We want people to be ready to interact with the character and enjoy the character without being confused about a bunch of extra stuff that's happened. And we certainly don't want you having to hunt down a bunch of out-of-print comics to be able to play the game.
And that was kind of the question that I was kind of building on the same thing, is somebody who is only familiar with the franchise from the movie perspective, how easy is it to fall into the game and understand the character and the story?
Absolutely. I think that the base assumption that we're going with here is that you have watched and enjoyed the films. Right? So if you've never read any of the comics and this is your introduction to Zula Hendricks and Davis 1, I think that you will find that they're interesting and fun characters, that you love getting to know them, and that everything about them gets explained in the course of the game that you need to know to play the game. So do not feel daunted at all. These are just these are characters that pre-exist and are really exciting to write.
You know, and it's interesting. I was very curious. I'm one of those people that always want certain things explained, but some things mystery. So, for example, like in Cold Forge, absolutely loved it. But that little voice in my head goes, where did they get the samples? Where did they get the samples? But then you also realize you don't need that to make the story work. That can only bog it down. How do you balance that when you do, especially like a game like this, between how much do I just leave up to their imagination and how much do I lay out there?
I'm really glad that you brought Cold Forge into it, because one of the things about Cold Forge is that the mystery is never actually explained, right? How did they get out? It doesn't actually say that. Is it in the book? Yes, it absolutely is. If you go and you read, there are clues all through the book about how the aliens got out, how they took over the facility. However, that's not the thrust of the story. Very much Alien Rogue Incursion, I worked on that writing in the same way. You don't have to understand exactly what happened, but if you go through the environment with a fine-tooth comb and you look at all the lore that I've put in there, you'll start to see there are a lot of Easter eggs, there is a mystery to solve, and there are people that, you know, have suffered on sight that you'll get to meet as characters sort of inside of that lore. So I think that, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
So for VR, it's first-person perspective and stuff. So instead of a traditional video game where it's linear and you're watching the action play out, like writing that, is that a different approach going to it?
Absolutely, it's a different approach, because not every moment when you're being hunted by aliens is a good one to have a conversation. You know what I mean? So like when people are crawling through a wet hallway, trying not to be killed, there's not going to be a lot of dialogue, which is interesting because we have characters that have a lot of history together and that have history with the xenomorph themselves. It's because we know that this is a character who is well known for hunting and fighting xenomorphs. This is not going to be somebody's maiden voyage with them, right? So that affects how the dialogue plays out. It's almost like she's seen the movies, And so that's really interesting. And as far as the VR nature of it is concerned, the VR nature of it is so immersive that when you try and have a context or a conversation out of context where it doesn't make sense, the players notice, we notice. It's something that we go and police and make sure that everything is as seamless and close to the realistic experience as it possibly can.
Is this one of those long franchise universes that has, the Bible, so to speak, that has all the lore in it that you have to fact check, or do you have to just rely on your own knowledge of everything?
Well, okay, so that is interesting because there are a lot of conflicts inside of the canon, right? And so one of the things that we tried to do is hew really close to the things that we knew were going to be strong contenders. So nobody gets mad at Alien, nobody gets mad at Aliens, so we know that, right? You know, Alien Defiance, we wanted to make sure that we worked in a lot of that lore. So that all goes in, you know. But as far as like how we work with the extended stuff, we're mostly trying to stick close to the cinematic stuff. We don't want to step on any movies or TV shows. We want to work with the license holder to make sure that they're really happy with everything, so that even though our projects are not related, they can remain as canonical as possible. Now, you know, Adam and I have discussed at length the differences in when and how canon matters, but for this game and for our purposes, I think that is probably the answer you're looking for.
And of course, you're well known for your contributions in Aliens fandom with your books, Cold Forge and Into Cryptus. You mentioned Easter eggs. Are we going to be seeing any Easter eggs from those? And how did overall your work in the book space, how did that, I guess, affect how you took on this project?
So, there might be one or two tiny little things. I don't tend to put a lot of references into my own work because it feels a little weird. I wouldn't say that. What I would say, to answer your other sort of part of the question, though, is that those other two books were really great because they were maiden voyages for me. This is not new to me to write inside of this universe. I know this place pretty well. And the things that I've learned have all come into play moving forward. But the biggest one is to stick as close to the standards that we know and love as possible and experiment with the narrative devices and the meta stories, things that we care about the people, because changing the lore and trying to come up with our own spin on aliens or whatever isn't going to make anybody happy. Right? What's going to make people happy is if we do a great job sticking with the rudiments, but we do it in a way that is groundbreaking and creative, in a way that they can't see coming. That's what we're really looking for. Now, I can't tell you if we did that. You're the fans, you'll have to tell us.
I'm curious about the writing process because I don't like to use the term linear, but when you write a book, you don't have to worry about the player doing something stupid and going off into an opposite direction, which changes the storyline. How do you do that and also understand there may be long gaps between when you can resume the narrative, shall we say? Right.
So there's mainline dialogue, and then there's contextual dialogue. I work with a team of narrative designers, Zoe Quinn and John Rayberger, who are really exceptional narrative designers. And what they do, in a lot of ways, you know, if you go to a door that doesn't have a key yet, you know, and that person has to have a, oh no, this is locked kind of line, that's somebody else. I'm not going to be writing that. You know, I'm going to be writing the dramatic moments, the ones where you get the real monologues where you go, oh, now it's time to burn this place to the ground kind of monologues. Yeah, and if you, by the way, if you're looking for those moments of empowerment and things like that in this game, they are going to be there. It's an action horror game. There are action moments and there are horror moments, and moments where you feel powerless and moments where you feel very powerful. And so the writing process needed to be engineered to optimize those moments, you know. So I'm always looking for places where we can have those important conversations about the characters' backstories and character development and things like that. Because I believe that when we have those in ways that matter to the players, that the immersion is just off the charts.
Does the writing for a video game experience is different than writing for a reader?
Oh, absolutely.
So did that kind of affect the way you had to approach the dialogue or the storylines?
Oh, 100%. Well, it's just like I was saying earlier, how you can't have a conversation in the middle of a hallway with a bunch of Xenos like, oh, what were we doing last night? Oh, excuse me a moment. Bang, 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 bang. You know, and so I will say that that's the first and the most obvious way. But the other thing is that you have to be really economical with your dialogue, right? if I've been traveling with you for 5 years, I'm not going to be like, hey Adam, remember when we traveled together for 5 years? You know, that's not going to happen, right? That's called expository dialogue, and it's something that we as writers have to avoid. And there's so much of that, and there's so much backstory that Zula Hendrick and Davis 1 have to explain. And there's so much backstory that Gemini Exoplanet Solutions has that has to be explained. And then at the same time, we still have to, even though we assume you've seen the movies, we still have to put enough explanation of, just in case you bought this game and you've never seen the alien before. You know, we need you to be able to be happy. And I think that we've done a good job of handling all that, but I think that it's a real tightrope to walk. You really don't have very much time to say those kinds of things, you know, because again, if you get 2 seconds to coordinate and you're running out of food and water, for, you know, you're stuck and there's a bunch of aliens hunting you, you're probably not going to say like, remember that time I, you know, got a back injury in the first battle I ever fought? That was wild.
So, you mentioned Davis is back, so for fans who are deep into like the expanded universe, when in relation to other expanded media does this take place? Pre-Colony War, or?
Gosh, you're trying to get Wayland Yutani to kill me. I can't say that. I can only say that it's during a time when Zula Hendricks and Davis 1 are active, which is a pretty wide expanse of time. I'm sorry. I'd love to tell you. I know the year and everything. But no.
How do you develop like moments for a game to do the jump scare moments, the horror moments, so that you can be like, this is where I want the player to really get the adrenaline rush?
Well, what's good about that is that I work with a design lead, so oftentimes they will come to me and they'll say like, we have a jump scare here and we have a jump scare here. So I'm more, it's like I'm getting the setup.
Okay.
Right. So like when you approach this window, you can expect it to come hit the glass or something like that. Then what that enables me to do is to go ahead and start throwing in red herrings. I'll have them start talking right before we get one of those jump scares or something like that, just to mess with you, right? So I think that I'm able to do that, but I think that most of the time, those kinds of big moments come from engineering.
Yeah, how does that process work between coordinating the story that you're writing and the game they're developing, so they kind of merge together and make a cohesive environment? Because obviously they have plans for one thing, you have ideas for another. How does that merge together?
It is a deeply collaborative environment where there is no room for divas and rock stars. I had to write lots and lots and lots of drafts to make it work as we gradually aligned towards what they were making. And that's how that always is when you're doing software development. If anybody here is a software developer, we all know that agile software teams change their objectives every sprint. Video game teams, not necessarily that different. They all have different things that they're pursuing on behalf of the license holders and investors. They have different things that they're pursuing as part of the business, what the fans are looking for, that kind of stuff. And I need to be there to support that. And so a lot of my writing, you know, you can't be precious about it. You know, you have to expect to throw stuff away. And when that happens, you can't get your feelings hurt. So it is, in that regard, I would say I've had more work hit the cutting room floor than just about any other project. But that's also because when I write a novel, I plan the novel by myself, and the only person that has to approve it is Disney. So it sort of works out.
Did it ever work the other way during this game? Like, I had this great idea for this scene that would work here, and then like, okay, we'll build that into the game, or
all the time. All the time. You know, where we would be, because the thing is, I still had to make a prediction about how
You guys have to be wrapped by 3.
I would do very well. I don't know what time it is. Is it 5 minutes from now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so a lot of times what would happen is I would sit down with level design and we would go through the level painstakingly, step by step, this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and this is going to happen. I would go back and write dialogue around that, and any part where I was like, well, I'm gonna have to take a guess at what happens here, I go ahead and take a guess. And there were plenty of times when they said, I really like that, let's make that a feature. Or I really like that, let's make sure it gets into the game. There were other times they said, oh, this is heartbreaking, that's so good, we can't do that. No, it really just depends. Any other questions that I can answer for you fine folks?
I will try. Building on that, obviously the games take years to develop. You mentioned multiple drafts. Did you run into a situation where they said maybe this is treading too tightly to Romulus, the TV series, the pending book, somewhere deep in the process where you had to go back and backtrack?
Sure. I did not run afoul of that. That has been an issue in previous books that I've worked on. For example, when I started working on Cold Forge, the Prometheus license and the Aliens license were different. So referencing Plagiaris Preptons, the Black Goo, and the Cold Forge actually was off script. They were actually like, I don't know if you're going to get away with that. And then Covenant came out, and then all of a sudden they said, oh, okay, I guess you're good. And so it was kind of, we didn't have any of those, I didn't have any of those issues. This time, I have had them before, but it's always something that's very solvable. I love working with the licensor, they're very easy to deal with. So, and usually I don't deal with a lot of notes. So,
Thank you.
look at that nice poster.
This is such a lucky
I don't have one of those.
Thank you